What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another draft breakdown for the Detroit Lions in the 2022 NFL Draft. This is a series where we take a look at a Lions draft pick. We break down that player. We give it a grade, the draft pick that is. We also talk about what this player's role and outlook may be with the Detroit Lions. Today, we are diving into the top 100 draft picks, and today we're taking a look at an absolute playmaker. So let's get it started.
Honestly, I watch the safeties, but I don't watch them so I can be them. I watch them so I can be better than them because I want to be the best.
Yeah.
With the 97th pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Kerby Joseph.
Yes! 5 picks, baby! Kerby Joseph is a Lion! Welcome, everybody, to the video. Glad you guys are here. And as you guys saw from that clip, this is pick number 97 in this year's draft for the Detroit Lions. And this is a position that I think all of us circled and took a look at and said, well, yeah, that's probably a need heading into this year's draft, even after signing safety Deshaun Elliott to pair with Tracy Walker, that re-signing and having some of the depth that we have with the Brady Breeze or the CJ Moores, who I'm a pretty big fan of. But there was still a type of safety that the Lions didn't have on their roster, or they haven't shown that they are that on the Lions roster. And that is more of the ball hawking safety. That's that guy that you don't want to throw it in his area because he might just pick the ball off. That may be Kerby Joseph for the Detroit Lions. This was one of the last picks of day number 2, and I know I was pumped when I saw this name. When I heard this name, when I heard them say Kerby Joseph, I was super excited. You know, it was a long day. We had a pretty long break between our last pick. It was nearing the end of day number 2, and you're just, it's dark outside. You're just waiting to see, okay, what's this final pick going to be? And you hear a name that you're familiar with. You've talked about it heading into the draft. Actually, I think this was the other player that I predicted the Lions would select. I'm not sure if it was at this spot or maybe earlier, but I think this is the other player that I predicted that the Lions would take. So we got 2 this year. Next year, we're aiming for 3. Usually when you're a top 100 pick, there's tons of different paths to being a top 100 pick. But a lot of times you have guys, they come in, they play a little bit as a freshman. Maybe they start as a freshman. They break out kind of early, and they're not in college very long. Quickly off to the NFL because they broke out so early in college. So they're a top 100 pick. They got to have a lot of excitement around them. Maybe they have these athletic traits that you just can't pass up on. Well, Kerby Joseph's path was a little bit different. And while he is very athletic, and we'll talk about that in a second, his path is a little bit different. You're talking about a 3-star coming out of high school that, had interest from teams like Syracuse, Mississippi State, but decided to pass on that. This was a two-way player coming out of wide receiver and defensive back that chose to go with Illinois. Now, he didn't break out immediately at Illinois. Actually, we barely saw him early at Illinois. It took until his final season, his 4th year, the Fighting Illini. I still like that name. It's still a pretty cool name, where he played over 700 defensive snaps. His statistics went to a completely new level that we have not seen. He had 5 interceptions. That's right, 5 interceptions. All right, it was top 3 in the nation. The likes of a guy like Verone McKinley out of Oregon, who was listed with 6. But he absolutely broke out in his final season. It took him some time to get on the field, to get his opportunity. But when he did, he absolutely took advantage of that, and that led to him being a top 100 pick. Now, sure, it may have scared some teams away that it's like, man, he didn't have production really up until his final. I mean, he had a little bit. He played a lot on special teams. For the last 2 seasons, he's played over 400 special teams snaps, and actually, he scored the first points of the college football season this past year on special teams with a safety working as a gunner on punt coverage against Nebraska. It was kind of just a whole mistake by the return team. But basically, there was a safety in punt coverage because of Kerby Joseph. So he technically scored the first 2 points of college football this past year. But when he finally broke into the starting lineup, when he became a starter for the Illinois defense, he took off statistically. And that background of being a receiver, being a 2-way player, showed up on the film, and it led to him and helped him have 5 interceptions this past year. Let's start off with the athleticism scores, some of his testing scores that he put up at the combine. We'll talk about some of the athleticism, and we'll continue to do that when we break down some of the film, and then we'll get into production, but then we're going to get into the film side, the run support, the coverage, all of those things. So let's start there with Kerby Joseph. Now, unfortunately, he suffered a tweaked, left hamstring actually at the combine, so we didn't get testing scores in terms of the speed, the agility, the 40 time, the 20-yard split, the shuttles, the 3 cones. We didn't have testing scores there, but he did do a few things before that took place. So let's start off with the measurements. So Kerby Joseph listed in at 6'1", 203 pounds, while posting 33-inch arms. 33-inch arms, it's very long arms. He has a massive wingspan. According to Pro Football Focus, it's 86 inches. Massive wingspan. It actually shows up beyond just what he does in coverage, which stuck out to me pretty early when watching the film. We'll get to that. Also, 10.25-inch hands. He has some pretty big hands as well. Okay, I know Kenny Pickett had the small hands. Well, that's not the case with Kerby. He's got some big hands. He's got some big mitts, as well as posting 18 bench press reps. Again, that was very above average for the positional group. 18 bench press reps and posting a vertical of 38.5 inches, which definitely speaks to some of the explosiveness that this player can have, and a 10.3 broad jump. So those are the testing scores that we got from Kerby Joseph. They all tested out pretty well. The speed scores, again, we didn't have any of those, or the agility scores, because of the fact that he tweaked his left hamstring and he didn't want to go through those drills. So understandable, we didn't get those testing scores, but that's okay. We know Brad Holmes, those guys, they have the GPS and all those kind of things. So they probably feel pretty good about what he is athletically. And actually the film, I think, speaks a lot to that. We did get to see him at the Senior Bowl as well. He wasn't on the Lions team, but we did get to see him at their Senior Bowl. We saw him work on some one-on-ones against wide receivers, and we got to, of course, see him in the game for a majority of the game. He played almost every snap in that game. Now, when we talk about his athleticism, of course, the scores look pretty good, but it's very clear very early how quick and how smooth he is and how fluid he is with his feet and his ability to open up his hips, change direction, and move that way. Okay, he is a very, very fluid mover. And it was the very first game that I watched before we drafted this guy, going way back. I watched him against Penn State, and I was just like, man, he just moves so well. He's so low to the ground. He's so smooth. You see his ability to open up his hips, change directions. Balanced he is. And of course, some of the explosiveness scores that we got came back pretty well. Now, I don't think it shows up all the time on his film for certain reasons, which we'll talk about, but the upside is definitely there. And then you talk about some of that long speed, right? Some of the range that you have. Now, range is beyond just how fast you are as a player. It's also about diagnosing, getting yourself in a position early. For example, Kyle Hamilton, right? He covers a lot of ground, but he doesn't run the fastest 40 time. Well, the case with Kerby, I don't know what he would run. Some people projected around the 4.5 range. That's probably fair, but the range does show up on film as his ability to cover a lot of grass pretty quickly. That being said, let's take a look at the production as well. So like I said, Kerby Joseph broke out last season. Last year, according to Pro Football Reference, he had 57 total tackles, 41 of those were solo, as well as 1 sack, which came against, who was that team? Penn State. 5 interceptions, a couple of passes defended. He's had a few in the past as well, according to Pro Football Reference. According to PFF, he had 4 forced incompletions, but it's really the coverage stats that stick out there, and also 2 fumble recoveries as well. And you see some awareness there to try to knock out the football in certain situations. Statistics really broke out this past season. It put him on the map, and it led to him being a top 100 pick. Maybe he goes higher. I mean, if he gets more reps earlier in his career, maybe he's much higher than this. He would have had more experience. You probably would have seen him come along a lot faster in his senior season, because as the year, you literally saw the guy improve. You saw him get more comfortable. Talk about not starting until 2021. He didn't even play a ton to begin the season. It took him a little while, and I thought you actually could see improvement through the year. Nebraska, he didn't seem to be on the field for every single snap, right? He seemed to be on and off the field. He didn't play against UTSA, so it wasn't until week 3 where it seemed like you really started to see him on the field all the time, when he became the starter in 2021. And what's important about this is I think he needs more reps in a lot of areas, specifically man coverage, which we know the Lions will give him man coverage reps in practice, just like they did for Tracy Walker off to the side. He gets extra reps, not just, here's one-on-ones, extra reps one-on-one, because if he has more comfortability there, more time there, he could excel in man coverage. He just hasn't been asked to do that a ton, seemingly, with Illinois. So that's a specific area. However, he's only 21 years old. So I know he's been in college for 4 years, but he's only 21 years old, and he doesn't turn 22 until November. So he's still a young prospect. A lot of guys 4 years, like, man, he's 23, 24, only 21 years old. They put him everywhere. Now, majority of the snaps did come at a deep safety position. He played 440 snaps there, according to PFF, but also 164 in the box, 64 at the slot position, and 41 on the defensive line. Now, not like, hand in the dirt, but across the defensive line. The point is, though, he played in a lot of different roles. They did a lot of disguise coverage, especially cover 2 disguise, where he would, come in the box and drop out into a cover 2, a closed middle field, and then they would drop into a cover 2 look. So there was a lot of disguises there. You all see a lot, and probably the majority, cover 1 defensively, where he would be the single high deep safety, where he'd have to show off some of that range. You saw some cover 3 looks where he'd play as a deep center fielder, but also he'd play underneath in cover 3 as well. Look, they played a lot of different coverages. He was asked to do a lot of different things. You saw him in the Senior Bowl. He took some reps from the box, lining up against tight ends, some against receivers there. You saw some off-man coverage. You saw him really get moved all around defensively, but a majority of his spot was playing as a free safety, playing as a cover one deep safety in that Illinois defense. And a free safety at the next level is probably going to suit him best, but there's no question some upside in terms of versatility, which I think is absolutely necessary when you take a look at trying to eventually pair a guy with Tracy Walker, because we'll get to the role while he may not be a starter day one. Eventually, you like to have some versatility there where he's not a one-trick pony. It's like, hey, here's all he can do. So Tracy Walker, because of that, you're going to have to do this because he can't do this. You get the versatility, you have the ability to play in the box, play deep, play slot, all those kind of things, which eventually should lead to the ability to have both those guys on the field at the same time. All right. All that being said, let's dive into this film. The first thing that I need to bring up here when you talk about watching this film is not in the run support or the pass coverage. Instead, it's kind of the intangibles of the player. And I watched the Senior Bowl back, and you hear Dan Campbell on the sideline talking about he's looking for how these guys are as teammates. Of course, are they doing it for themselves? Are they doing it for the team? That kind of thing. Just how are they showing themselves as teammates? And rewatching the film for Kerby Joseph, first starting off with the Iowa game, it stuck out very quickly the kind of teammate that Kerby Joseph was. I think when you talk about pursuit to the ball, you talk about pursuit to the ball in the run game, those kind of things. Usually talk about making the play on the football, and occasionally you would see that for Kerby, but not always making the play, but just continuously pursuing the football and ending up around the football by the time the play is over. I'm celebrating with teammates, supporting his teammates, that kind of thing. Just being a good teammate, being there for his players. If someone had something to say to his teammate, he would get involved with it. I'm also play with that edge as well, where someone says something to him, he's going to get in their face. He played with some of that edge with inside the tackle box, being aggressive, working against blockers. And again, in this Iowa game, you saw him come up limping on his leg, and it's not like he came off the field. Comes up limping, and then he kind of shakes it off. You see him go through the next play. A little bit later in the game then, here comes the tight end that he was kind of getting into it with a little bit earlier in the game. Tight end puts a block on him. You see him limping again on his leg, but it was kind of just staying on the field, playing through the injury, right? Playing through that and being very competitive, playing with that little edge, just kind of that teammate that always seemed to have his players back, uplifting, celebrating with them. He tried to get involved in every celebration. If cornerback makes a play underneath, he's up deep, he's going to end the play by that cornerback, celebrating with them, that kind of thing. But at the same time, seemingly having the players back, not wanting to come off the field, showing that competitive nature. So that's honestly the first thing that I wrote down while watching him against Iowa. It was kind of the intangibles, the teammate that he showed.
If you honestly want to win and you also honestly want to be great, you got to make sure the people around you are great.
Yeah.
So if one of my teammates don't know what's going on, then it's my job to make sure that he knows what's going on and make sure he's right, because that team is going to find that one fish.
Let's start off with Kerby's run support. Now, this is an area where he seems to get a lot of knocks from a lot of people. They seem to knock his run support, but honestly, I don't think it's that bad. Now, when we say run support, I do want to make it clear it's beyond just a run play. This also means, short quarters tackling as the last line defense. It can come off a pass play. We're talking about run angles, his hitting power, all of those things, forced fumbles, things like that. So just keep that in mind when we say run support. It's beyond just being a run play. However, this is an area where he does get a lot of knocks from a lot of people, and this could, if he struggled as a run defender, it could limit a little bit of his versatility, especially day one, because if he's a liability against the run, you have to try to keep him out of whatever that situation is. It can take away some versatility if that is an issue. However, I actually thought he was a pretty darn good run defender. Now, he does have some missed tackles, and we'll talk about where those show up, but for the most part, he's a pretty reliable run tackler that seems to change up his form and his technique based on the situation for whatever it calls for, which I really like. Let's start off with some of that length, because I think his length, his wingspan, shows up in multiple areas, which really benefits him as a run defender. First off, taking on blocks. Right now, his frame, and it probably never will be, is something though that you want him playing within the box, getting picked up by offensive linemen. That's probably not an area where you want him. If he's going to get picked up by an offensive lineman, he's probably going to be pushed out of the play. And right now, there are some inconsistencies when you talk about using some of that momentum when it comes to taking on blockers. However, he's actually pretty successful against receivers and tight ends. Not something that I was really expecting. Against tight ends and receivers, I'm expecting him to be washed out and have no chance, but that's actually the complete opposite. His length, his wingspan really shows up, and so does the 18 bench press reps. He has some very legitimate power when it comes to stacking and shedding tight ends and receivers at the second level. Using that length, getting up on you early, gets up on the shoulder pads, uses that length, kind of walls off guys, shows some of a punch to be able to stack and shed and be useful against the run. And you saw from multiple different alignments points, but specifically when it comes to within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, that kind of thing, working downhill a little bit more, working from within the blocks. If a wide receiver or tight end's trying to block him, he's actually had a lot of success against them, and he does a pretty good job of avoiding them as well, being elusive, getting over the top with the swim move, completely avoiding those guys in general. So I thought his ability against receivers and tight ends that were trying to block him was pretty darn good, and that will lead to some versatility because he's not getting washed out of play no matter where he is. Yes, blocked by offensive linemen probably will have an issue there, like most safeties. You know, some are unique and they can do much better there, and they avoid it, and they're very strong, or they're low to the ground. But for him, when it comes to wide receivers and tight ends, which a majority of the time he's going to have to deal with, I thought he was really good here, and his wingspan showed up big time. Now, with that being said, let's also talk about his run angles, because this is, again, another area where I think he is pretty darn good, specifically as the last line of defense. Of course, the job here is don't let someone get by you, right? Be the deepest of the deepest. Don't let the play get by you. Be reliable in the back end. I don't need you laying a big hit. I don't need you forcing a fumble. I just need you to bring the guy down. If it comes to that situation, just bring him down. And he understands that assignment. You see him change it up based on his tackling approach, based on the situation. But as the last line defense, this may be his best area as a run defender. He is extremely reliable, and it starts with the run angles that he takes. He doesn't get very steep, not very crisp. He's more rounded. I would say you can almost call it like gliding as a run defender, which I actually think is a good thing because it allows him to much easier change directions while not playing at 100% full speed but covering ground. He glides. You see some long strides in there as a run defender, but he is very reliable as the last line defense because of the run angles that he takes, because he doesn't bite extremely heavily on something as that last line. And then when it comes to the tackling side, the wingspan helps him a ton, because if he does miss, if a guy pulls a juke on him or run him out in space, you see that wingspan to break down, kind of caress the running back and just make a tackle. And it may be very ugly. He may give up some leakage. There's not a lot of big hits when that becomes the situation. But out there as the last line defense, I just need you to bring the guy down. I just need you to not give up the biggest play. And he'll give up some few extra yards, but it's all about angles for him. He takes very calculated, reliable angles. Working downhill as a run defender, you know, kind of laying those big hits. I think he's fearless as a run defender. I think he's fearless as a tackler, and that can come with passes over the middle, working downhill, having a really good angle. You don't really see him pull up necessarily, but I do think that his technique's pretty inconsistent for laying those big hits. There are some reps, specifically early in the season, that you watched, teams like Virginia, maybe even Iowa as well, where he didn't always sink into his tackles. Instead, he would just lower his head, and that's something you have to be very careful of. You want to see what you're hitting. Sometimes he would just put his head down at contact. He wasn't afraid to, try to lay a big hit. You just didn't get that kind of smack or that thump that you would like, and I think that's from inconsistent technique. He doesn't always get sink on his tackles. He doesn't always run through the guy. Didn't always seem to see what he was hitting. He would kind of just put his head down. Now, I think what he'd like is that he worked to get his head out of the way, right? I mean, that was something that you see when he would sink into his tackles. He worked to get his head to the side of the ball carrier, which was good, but I think sometimes he didn't always see what he was tackling. It would cause him to lose some of that balance as the run defender, which would kind of overset him to one side, and then he became more of a reach tackler. So he didn't have that consistent momentum through a tackler to consistently have that power as a run defender. That's something. I don't think it's a willingness. I don't think it's being afraid to lay the big hit. I just don't think you see the consistent technique that he needs to have for that to be the case. But like I said, he does change up his approach based on the situation. Now, the area that you saw him miss tackles, the area where you had a few, was basically at the catch point. We'll talk about this more in pass coverage, is that because he does try to change up his approach. If he feels like he can't make a play on the football in terms of trying to make an interception, he goes into this, okay, I have to attack at the catch point. I got to put my shoulder down. I got to kind of ram into whoever's catching the football to try to jar that ball loose. I do like that, but this is where you saw some missed tackles because, again, he didn't always have his head up here, and he would kind of just throw his body into guys at the catch point. And while sometimes it was good, you saw some good ones here as well, other times the timing wasn't great, and he didn't even get much connection, and the receiver would make the grab, bounce off of his tackle, just throwing his body. Sometimes the timing wasn't always great, where it didn't always line up with, okay, as soon as he's catching it, I'm hitting him. Instead, the receiver's already caught the ball, then he lunges, he doesn't really see what he's hitting, and it leads to misses there. That's where missed tackles showed up. Aside from that, I don't think I saw him miss a single tackle. One of his best tackles came against Wisconsin when he makes the last line defense, saving tackle at the 2-yard line from the end zone. You see a nice wrap up, you see him go low, you see him get his head off to the side, and you see him finish. Not a big thump, but again, he makes a very clean, reliable tackler. But then you get him inside the tackle box, you'll see him kind of just go for the legs, go for the ankles, and that's fine because of all the traffic around. He doesn't need to be the most secure tackler. He's just trying to limit every single yard possible. So you saw him change his approach, which made him seemingly aware of the situation. Okay, I can't let more yards here. I got to make the tackle. Or here, I really want to just close off as many yards as I possibly can, so I'm going to change it up.
These clips show that he's fearless, and some work with T-Walk will help a ton, but he tries to get his head out of the way, but he doesn't always see what he's hitting. He comes in a little high on this kind of play, and he kind of is very susceptible to receivers to just stop and start, kind of slide out of the way. This one looks a lot cleaner, though. His receiver doesn't have a chance to move, and he times it up at the catch point.
Then you even saw the awareness at the tackle point from behind to chop at the football. He didn't get forced fumbles, but you saw some of the awareness to chop at the ball. I saw it a few times when watching him. And then you see the 2 forced fumble recoveries. And to me, again, that's that pursuit. It's the continuous pursuit towards the ball where eventually he ends up in the right place at the right time. He picks up the ball and boom, there you go. It's a fumble recovery. Reliable in the last line defense, run angles, things like that. Really the only thing that seemed to move him, and again, it depended on situations here. He'd get more aggressive when in the box on play action versus being the last line. He wasn't as aggressive there. Now, motions did seem to draw his attention. However, I noticed they only seemed to draw his attention when it was zone coverage. So when it would directly impact where his zone was and things like that. When it was man coverage and here comes a tight end or receiver motion and someone's trailing with him and they're following him, he doesn't get moved by it.
Now, this is a pass play, but I thought it was one of the better examples of Kerby Joseph not giving up the big play. So you're going to see him initially commit to this toss play, but it doesn't overcommit. He's going to watch the running back and the offensive line start to work his way down. However, he doesn't overcommit. You see the change direction, balance, picks up on the slot tight end working the other way, and as soon as he notices that tight end starts to look upfield for the pass, he gets his eyes to the quarterback who's working to catch the pass, and he makes a play on the football. This is totally heads up and not getting sucked into the play.
Be your biggest hitter, but there's enough versatility here. There's that edge that he plays with. There's the fight that he plays with that, yeah, it's inconsistent, some of the momentum that he leads into blockers, but he can fight and hold his own ground. You saw in the Senior Bowl, one of his tackles. You saw it in some of the games against tight ends where he's just, bam, at the point of attack, using those long arms to kind of lock out, wall off blockers, and then get engaged in the play. It's inconsistent, but there's that feistiness. But then as the last line, yeah, you got to make the tackle. You have to make that saving tackle. You could not give up the play here. He's going to be very reliable in that area as well. So I think as a tackler, it kind of gets overblown. Is it inconsistent? Yes. You always see the power you would like? No. But at the same time, he's a pretty good run defender. I mean, there wasn't very many misses. And again, to me, the misses stemmed from more trying to make a play on the football at the catch point rather than just simply as a tackler. He didn't miss many tackles. Now, he did get some reach tackles in there because he didn't always square himself up with the ball. And again, he kind of, your body goes where your head goes. So when he goes like this, his body's going to go that way too. You overset, you miss a tackle, then you're reaching out and trying to corral it. So that happened, but he didn't miss many tackles, and he changed up his approach based on the situation. So I actually liked him as a run defender. I'm not saying I'd be like, man, he's a run defending safety, but is he a liability? I would say no. He just needs work here to make it more consistent, clean it up more, because in the NFL, you probably will be beat more often than you were in college for having bad technique. So I would say you just like to see it be more polished, but the willingness and all of those things are there. Pass coverage is kind of all over the place because we've got to talk about what he does in different areas. And as we said, he was used in a lot of different spots. Majority of the time, he's a free safety, single high within that defense. Remember when he was recruited there, Lovie Smith was there as a coach this past year. Their head coach was a former coach for the Giants as an outside linebackers coach and a defensive line coach for the Patriots. Spent time in multiple places, but a majority of his snaps in coverage this past season took place as a single high deep safety, but you felt like they were moving him around where certain games called for different alignments and they were trying to figure out where is he best suited. It led to a lot of versatility. You saw him in the Senior Bowl play some of those single high reps, but also at the same time come down, line up against slot, line up on a tight end, those kind of things. And then you'd see the occasional disguise, shell coverage defensively, quarters coverage. You saw a little bit of that sprinkled in as well. So you saw tons of versatility within his game. This was a player that I feel like really improved throughout the season in comfortability, understanding here's my, where I'm supposed to be, here's where he's supposed to be, passing things off, being much more comfortable, getting on routes quicker, and it still needs time. I think when you talk about him, you're like, yeah, he's raw. He needs more opportunities, needs more experience. It's not because he's like bad, but it's because he could be a little bit quicker, and you have to speed up in the NFL. The game's a lot faster, and you'd like to see him be a little more decisive in certain areas, which we're going to talk about. But one thing, his biggest strength, there's a pass coverage, at least it probably was at Illinois is his ability to track the football. And again, having the former receiver background, right, being a receiver in the past, shows up very quickly when you watch him in terms of pass coverage. It's the ability to pick up a receiver while watching the quarterback's eyes. So watching the quarterback's eyes, okay, he's looking here. And this comes when he's kind of in a free situation, free safety alignment usually, right? Cover one man, I'm the free safety on this play, so I can kind of roam a little bit here. Or if his assignment, there was a situation against Virginia, which I thought was a really nice play, but his tight end that he was lined up against didn't go out. He stayed in the block, so he kind of became into a little bit of a free alignment. So he dropped in the zone, used read the quarterback's eyes, and nearly came up with an interception. Those kind of situations. But his ability to read the quarterback's eyes, transition that into finding the receiver, and then tracking the football to make a play on the ball. He attacks the ball like a receiver. So if it's a situation where he feels like he can go make a play on the ball, he doesn't approach it as, I need to knock this ball down. He approaches it, I'm going to make an interception. I'm going to make a play on the ball. And that's why you get 5 picks last year, because breaking it down, that's cool. And we've seen Tracy could do this, but this is an area where I want to see Tracy develop and become more of a playmaker at the catch point. This is natural for Kerby Joseph, right? I mean, he's naturally coming in, and this is why he brings a different element, because he needs to improve. He needs to become more decisive in certain spots. He needs more experience. But naturally, when the ball is in the air, the way he approaches that football is as if he was a receiver. He looks so comfortable attacking the football while it's in the air, approaching it, setting it up like a receiver would. I mean, going up for it at the catch point, then letting it kind of fall into his arms.
And you got to look him off in these short yardage situations because of his length, his range with his arms, that radius that he can cover. Pretty fluid. You see, again, the balance on this movement. And then it's the concentration like a receiver. Tip it off, soft hands, and make a play.
And where I think you start to see him look a little bit more comfortable as the season went on, specifically from playing some of those, closed center field alignments defensively, is you start to see the awareness on underneath routes, crossers, all those things. And we'll talk about the feet and stuff in a second. But then I think you start to see the understanding of, okay, this guy has this zone. Let me pass it off. Let me drop down. Layers concepts. If there was a route that was over top and he would pass it off to the outside corner. There was this play against Penn State where he passes off the outside route.
Penn State forces Illinois to communicate here. This is something that we saw the Lions do a lot last season. They're going to run this return motion, so you're going to see the safeties have to communicate. They're going to run a form of a 3-deep defense on this play with the 2 safeties being deep. Watch Kerby Joseph pass this outside route as soon as Jahan Dotson breaks and then gets underneath for this dig route. I would like to see him be a little bit quicker to pick up on that underneath route. However, you see how smooth it looks.
And this kind of comes to the feet, the quickness, the ability to open his hips, those kind of things. His change of direction is so fluid and so smooth. It gives his upside, incredibly high. There was this play against Penn State again. You look at these underneath routes, right?
I really like this play from Kerby here. They're going to go man coverage across the board, and Kerby Joseph, you're going to see immediately off the snap, Penn State's quarterback's going to peek left, and he's going to jump underneath as if they were trying to set up some kind of, pick route. Now, actually, they're going to be setting up a fade route to the outside here, but he jumps underneath as if this was a quick route. But watch how many times he changes directions on this play, and then ultimately runs the quarterback down, and here is that sack on his stat sheet.
The movement skills that he has, he doesn't, struggle to, okay, I have this guy, but now he's making this cut. Now I got to try to transition. The transitions are seamless, almost like a cornerback. He moves like a cornerback. The transitions are so smooth, which gives him tons of man coverage upside.
Honestly, though, his movement skills are going to translate everywhere in coverage, but then you could also use him in, nickel sub packages where you could put him over in the middle of the field. And again, this is where I thought Kyle Hamilton was dangerous, like against Toledo, where he covers so much because of his length, but then the movement skills to pass off routes pretty effortlessly. If he just continues to improve what he's seeing, it's hard to attack anywhere near him. Range is more than 40 time for plays like this. Watch Kerby at the top of the screen here. Look how much ground he covers. Now, this ball's going to be tipped right there. Now, if I told you he picks this off, would you believe me? Look at this. And then again, the concentration like a receiver. That's incredible.
Now, what you saw is that in the Senior Bowl, and you saw it a little bit during the season, is they could play him a little bit closer in alignments, not press alignments, but more base alignments, like 5 yards off the line of scrimmage. You can line him up on a tight end, right? You can line him up on a slower receiver. Probably going to be most comfortable, however, playing more off-man coverage, where he has much more of a cushion that he's allowed to give up, and then change directions. But against tight ends, because of his length, because of his size, because of his playmaking ability, he wasn't really attacked much. However, he also didn't play much in this role. But you saw glimpses, especially in the Senior Bowl, of what he could do here.
Now, we're going to take a look at his Senior Bowl clip in the box in a second, but this is an off-man coverage rep where he's in the slot, and this is one of those situations where the Lions can play cover zero, blitz their linebackers, put him on the sticks, and hopefully he covers those sticks. And here you can see he's pushed and attacked towards the inside, but the ability to open up his hips so seamlessly and run up the seam is very easy and smooth for him. Even just little reps like this, this slot receiver basically throw three jabs at him, right? He cuts in, then back up, then back in, and just look at the fluidity and the balance.
in terms of man coverage on tight ends, those situations.
This is the versatile upside. I didn't see him do this very much at Illinois, but they're going to put him in a box here on Trey McBride. They're going to do this stretch run, play action, rollout, but you're going to see him stay home, come to balance here on McBride, not overset. Watch him get plant, balanced, work back outside, and then use the length to knock this away.
Sure, it was not rare to see coverage breakdowns for the Illinois defense. I'm not putting all this on him because he seemed to be a very good communicator pre-snap, and you saw some pre-snap recognition. There was a certain play where there was no one lined up. They were playing man coverage. There was no one lined up on the slot, and he's trying to get attention, so he runs over there, lines up on the slot, tries to get attention of a teammate, has him slide over and take that matchup. So you saw the pre-snap awareness of where players need to be. And there was a lot of communication, but the communication sometimes seemed to be off, as there was definitely blown assignments of two guys covering one. That happened way too often, especially against motions, pre-snap motion, guy flips field, and then they would have two guys covering one. Kerby Joseph would be covering the same guy as someone else, and someone would be wide open. That's not all on him. You saw the communication, but that was not rare to see breakdowns in coverage where two guys were ultimately covering one, and that again probably comes with experience. But it wasn't like he was, I'm not talking to my teammates, very loud, very vocal, very aware pre-snap, but it was just getting everybody on the same page where you saw issues within this defense. Now, we talked about this earlier when you talk about biting on play actions, play fakes. He was outstanding against run pass options and getting himself in a position early to make a play. He seemed to play based on cornerback leverage, but also kind of the situation. Sometimes it was the short side of the field. He would cheat a little bit that way in certain spots, but he didn't bite on those play fakes really at all. I mean, there was like no first step down into the box. Does not bite, stayed very patient there. It's incredible here at covering ground, getting in a position to make a play.
Kerby did say that he developed a feel for quarterbacks and where they like to go in certain situations, but this looks like an entire defensive field thing based on what Iowa comes out in here. You see the linebacker communicate with the outside corner, and Kerby Joseph is going to start sliding the opposite direction. The ball fake, play fake does not bite him at all to the opposite side, and he's sitting there waiting. Great ball skills, gets the foot down. That's pretty. An interception. I feel like one thing I've noticed about Kerby, so he doesn't bite on play action, is he reads the offensive line off the snap, how they move, right? Are they going upfield? Are they staying and pass protecting? And once he reads that, he starts to get some depth. And on this play, he kind of just watches the outside receiver here, and Kerby Joseph is all over it. And again, it's the ball tracking. You want him maybe to get eyes on the receiver sooner, but as soon as he does, watch him track this football in the air like the receiver and make a play. This is awesome. This is the kind of ball hawk that we need, but also a guy that's going to start help limit those big plays. So on this play, you're going to get this guy's two-shell look. The slot on the other side is going to drop, and he's going to take the half of the field on this play. You're going to get this RPO. Watch him check out the route on his side so he knows where it's going. And I think here he's just baiting the Penn State quarterback, kind of slowing down, waiting for him to throw it. He goes to the fake, then he starts to move over a little bit more. Once that ball goes up, you can see his reaction afterwards. He's thinking, man, I would have picked that. I would have intercepted that.
I think you would like to see somewhat better route anticipation pre-snap. What do I mean here? Specifically inline tight ends. He seemed to be at times unaware that there was an inline tight end and that route could be released. And again, because usually in zone coverage, especially on the middle, when that snap was made, he's watching the quarterback's eyes, he's reading off of that. He could have a pretty good feel on where the routes were, but then it was like the backside tight end or the inline tight end that may release, may not, that maybe he didn't see off the snap, that he didn't always seem to have awareness of where maybe that tight end was or where the feel was. Instead, he would just read the quarterback's eyes, and by the time he would move over there, he wasn't in position to make a play on the football.
But with all this being said, it is important to keep in mind that this Virginia game was really the first game that he started in the season. So it's still very early, and you can see him playing the man-off coverage, having to keep an eye on the running back out the backfield. But then as this pass goes over the middle of the field, he's able to hit the tight end and make a play.
Here's the area where I think he could be better, and this comes with, I think, more snaps, more reps. But this is where we talk about he's much more of a more fluid change of direction, open to hips, that kind of thing right now, than he shows the explosiveness. But the explosiveness is there. Why is that the case? I think he second guesses. You do see some indecision sometimes to completely go 100%, boom, I'm breaking on this route. Instead, it's like, okay, I'm kind of going there. I already saw the route. I see the quarterback looking there. I may take a step, but then I'm going to kind of not go 100%. I'm going to go 70% towards the football. And he gives up the reception, make a play on the guy when he catches the ball, but it's not that sellout, I'm making a play here. And I think, again, that comes with repetition. It comes with experience. It comes with that comfortability. It's like anything, once you get comfortable with something, you stop thinking about about it. And to me, there's just too much thinking going on there. There's too much processing, and you can't process, especially in the NFL. You just got to play fast. And to me, there was indecision at times, which led receptions that he possibly could have made a play on earlier. And yes, you will give up plays when you do that, but you have to be more decisive on, I believe that this is where the ball's going, the quarterback's looking there, the route's breaking, and sometimes you'd see him like slide over, but he wouldn't completely go. And that's an area where I feel like he could be more decisive. His range, his change of direction, his willingness downhill, you clean up some of that indecision, he's going to be a very big problem because he covers the field so fast. False step or something's going to throw him off. He can easily change directions. He's so fluid to get back into the route and play it like a receiver that half the field looks for him, which he didn't do a ton in college, but he showed the range to play some of those situations, which we're going to ask our guys to do, because sometimes T-Walk will come down, he'll man a tight end, something like that. It'll be like, hey, cover one. Okay, you're going to have to handle this. We've seen Tracy have to do it. He could do that. But split coverage, quarters looks, he's going to be really scary and dominant, I believe. The upside, it's kind of more of a projection, but I think the upside there is very, very legitimate. But then you have to have that versatility where, hey, I can cover a tight end. I can cover, a running back. Easily has to change direction to it, especially from man off coverage. You just want to see some of the indecision cleaned up, but he's willing to go downhill. He's just sometimes second guessing a little bit, but willingness to go downhill, the playmaking at the catch point. There was one where it was such an ugly technique. I'm not sure what he was doing here. And to me, this was another coverage, miscue, because you see him in man coverage play straight up. I'm not sure what he was doing on this play.
This is his interception against Virginia, and I think there's a coverage breakdown here. You can see the communication pre-snap. I think he thinks this is another one of those disguised coverage looks where he drops in his zone coverage because he drops like he's playing zone. Meanwhile, everybody else is playing man coverage. Now notice the outside cornerback on the boundary side. See how he stays in on this play. We saw Kerby Joseph drop and almost make a play on the football earlier in this game, but clearly there's a mess up here for Kerby Joseph. However, you see the recovery to try to undercut this route, and then it's about making a play on the football. Yes, if this ball is led, it should be a touchdown, but it's not. However, he fights his way back to play, and he just rips this ball from the tight end at the catch point and comes up with an interception. This is a heck of a recovery to make a pick out of this.
But he could easily run with these guys. Deep speed, he has the length and wingspan to be really good at the catch point, effective, and change directions. I don't want him on a receiver like he had some issues against Christian Watson and Alec Pierce and specifically Khalil Shakir.
This is a spot where I think he just needs reps. Here he is off the release for Shakir. He kind of just has a little extra gather there. Then Christian Watson hits him with a little stutter, which allows him to get a little bit of a step over top. It's still not bad coverage here. It's just a little bit of a back shoulder pass. Moves like this from receivers is a little new, but you do see the fact that he's able to get his head turned around like a receiver would. And then finally, you have a guy like Alec Pierce, and hopefully we're not in situations where he has to run with someone this long. Hopefully if he's a man on a receiver, we're blitzing. He gets a little overly aggressive here as Alec Pierce comes to a stop and it leads to the flag being thrown. But in this situation, we should be blitzing, so we shouldn't have to hang with double moves.
But I don't want him in that. He shouldn't be in that. One cut, yeah, he might be okay, but he's going to be his best. If he ever is on a wide receiver in off coverage, that way he has a lot of cushion, he needs the cushion there. But I don't think that'll be much of his matchups, right? They're not going to put him very often on a receiver. Maybe time to time you get it because there's a breakdown or you need him here and you're trying to blitz. And it's fine. I think there's off-man coverage, that upside that I don't know if we have on our team. I don't think a guy moves like he does in terms of, that ability. So while it's not all there and it's probably not ever going to be great because he's not a cornerback, he can handle some of those spots.
I had to sit down and talk to with myself, times when you got to look in the mirror and just talk to yourself. And I told myself, I was like, I'm tired of being average.
His role this season. Well, I think this is very interesting. I will throw out here, man, this guy is just a really good athlete. Okay, by the way, I know we talked about this. He's very bouncy in the lower body. We see him doing the backflips and stuff. There was literally a play in a game where he flipped over a blocker that fell down. Now, I don't think he landed it, but it's just that natural athleticism, the bounciness that he has in the lower body. The point is, though, what is his role this season with the Lions and going forward? Well, this is interesting because we heard Brad Holmes talk about it after the draft pick. Of course, they got to get him in the building. It's going to be fierce competition, as Brad Holmes said, but he also talked about how he's a ball hawk, how he's rangy, but at the same time, he is a little raw, right? He hasn't had a ton of experience, especially as a starter at safety position. He's played a lot on special teams, so I do believe he'll come in day one and give you something on special teams, whether that's as a gunner. He played in the field goal block. He played all over the place in special teams. He's played everywhere in special teams. Defensively, I don't know if I see him starting day one. I don't think I see him starting day one, especially when you're in, two safety defenses. I don't really see him starting there. I think it's going to be Tracy Walker and Deshaun Elliott. However, I do see him eventually becoming a big part of the secondary, someone that can play alongside Tracy Walker, but maybe initially backing up Tracy Walker. I could see that being kind of the progression for him, backing up Tracy Walker. Tracy, he's done so many things well. Downhill, his ability to tackle, work downhill, play tight ends. He's very smart. He's just a very versatile safety, but he's just missing some of that playmaking in the back end. Deshaun Elliott, another guy that's pretty big hitter, right? And he can man up. He's very versatile as well, but neither of those guys bring that ball hawk. This is someone that brings a different element to the Lions secondary that we didn't have, and we really needed it, right? So I don't think he'll start day one. He could. He absolutely could. I don't think he will, however. I think it'll be Elliott, and it will be Tracy Walker. And there's going to be good competition with C.J. Moore and Juju Hughes and Brady Breeze. And I don't know, Will Harris said they decided to keep him in that position. However, I think he'll be the third safety in there, and he can absolutely play in nickel sets early. Like, we're going to play some 3 safety sub packages, and I think when you see with his versatility, his ability to play the middle of the field, he could come down in sub packages. He could work the middle, play zone coverage there. He could possibly play some off-man coverage, which is going to be huge. He could play in the shell coverage, put Deshaun Elliott down, put T-Walk down. He probably want to keep T-Walk back. Maybe bring Deshaun Elliott down, further into the box in those nickel sets.
I absolutely believe with his length, his willingness to come up and tackle, his movement skills, he could play in the slot and nickel packages. I mean, he could be a very nice nickel piece early, because as much as I like A.J. Parker, he wasn't great last season. I mean, he wasn't great last season. This is a guy that doesn't want to come off the field. And like he says here, Lions are already giving him some slot work. They're going to find a way to put this guy on the field because he's a ball hawk and because he's played so many different spots and because athletically he's not really limited. I mean, his movement skills are so good. He just needs reps. Absolutely think with more man coverage practice, he could be very flexible.
Actually, what I want to do, like, I want to be able to be more versatile around the field. So I would always be on the field. Like, I wouldn't have to come out in different packages and stuff. So if I could play nickel safety, I mean, you could throw me in the corner spot if you want to. I mean, like, just as long as I could stay on the field.
But eventually he could absolutely become a starter in this back end alongside Tracy Walker. They're definitely looking for that partner, and I think he needs to get some things cleaned up, play a little bit quicker in certain areas where you can kind of rely on it more. But the upside in terms of coverage is at a spot that you want to have him on the field, because we don't really have that right now. So I could see during the season him becoming the starter. I could absolutely see that. Obviously injuries have come up with Elliott. Hopefully that's not the case, and that's not how he finds his way in. But I could see him becoming a much bigger part as the season goes on, where his snap counts go up and up and up. With that being said, though, I like Deshaun Elliott. He just needs to stay healthy. Tracy Walker is not going to come off the field very much. So I think he's going to start off as a backup, be in nickel sets, but eventually he'll become a starter, and his long-term outlook for me is a guy that's going to be a pairing with Tracy Walker, for years to go. Maybe after this season, he'll be the starter, and the year after that, he'll be the starter. I think that's the long-term outlook for him. And Kerby Joseph, I think the draft pick is good because it was necessary. We needed a safety, but not only did we need a safety, we needed someone that could bring versatility. However, versatility that could play man coverage has upside, but also is a ball hawk. We needed someone like that really threatens defense, that you don't want to throw it in his area. One thing about Kyle Hamilton that made him so great is that, yeah, he's great against the run, but anytime the ball was in his area, you were worried that it might get picked off. Kerby, not to that extent, because he's not as long, he's not as tall, but he is long. And if the ball is in his area, because of his background, the way he attacks the football, how natural it looks, you're a little bit nervous when you throw the ball towards him. To have that in Tracy Walker, but enough versatility where they can, work back and forth, that's where I think development will be needed. However, I think eventually he'll become the starting safety the Lions need to make. Now, Nick Cross went right before him. I liked Nick Cross. Nick Cross is a really good player, but he's not the ball hawk. He doesn't seem to have that kind of upside as a guy that's going to turn you over multiple times in a game. He doesn't have the fluidity. Now, he's more of a hitter, right? I mean, even though he got caught in some drag down situations, we can put him in a slot in nickel sets. We can be a little creative with him because he just has some natural athleticism that, yeah, he needs more reps, but I mean, man, not many safeties move like this guy. It just doesn't happen. This is a must draft pick for the Detroit Lions. So let me know your thoughts, comments below on Kerby Joseph. I'm excited to see how this plays out, man, because we may have finally hit that ball hawk that we haven't had. He does have some similarities in terms of build to a Taylor Rapp, which we saw the Rams bring in. Now, he didn't have the same necessarily skill set coming out. He's more known as a hitter, but he had a similar build and similar athleticism in a way in terms of explosiveness that Taylor Rapp did. He was a second-round pick by the Rams. Marcus Williams is not a great tackler. He's not. He was known to be a better tackler coming out. I think Marcus Williams is not a great tackler, something that needs to be cleaned up here with technique, but could be that ball hawk that, just diagnoses, understands where things are pre-snap, great communicator in the back end that should get him on the field sooner rather than later. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.